Hare Krishna, Jaya, Shilo Prabhupada. And this is episode 3 of Who is Your Spiritual Master, our online book covering the whole entire topic. We have all the different aspects of this topic are categorized here. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the May 28th conversation here. I'm just showing you all the different chapters we have in this booklet online. So again, you'll see the URL at the top here. It's prabhupadinitiation.blogspot.com. We're on that website. This is accessible to anybody online. So the May 28th conversation is a conversation. This is in May 28th, 1977, where the GBC met with Prabhupada in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada was ill at the time. Prabhupada, his health was not well. And there was a lot of devotees that wanted to be initiated. And at the same time, Prabhupada was, making plans for the future. He was laying out the system for the future of the movement. And this is where the GBC met with him in Vrindavan to ask him, where they specifically asked him how initiations would go on in the future, and where he specifically says that he would appoint some Ritviks to perform initiations. So here, let's go to the May 28th conversation. So in this May conversation tape, let's just jump straight to the conversation. So this conversation is somewhat a little bit confusing when you just take it by itself as it is. Why is it like this? I mean, it seems that Prabhupada is saying that, it can be interpreted in different ways, in other words, and it has been interpreted in different ways afterwards over the years. So when we look back at this conversation, when you take the final thing that Prabhupada says, that is like the conclusion of it. And he says, when I order, you become guru. But that order, that specific order, we don't find anywhere where Prabhupada really had ever specified these persons would become initiating gurus. So they asked the question, Satsvroops asked the question, our next question concerns initiations in the future, particularly at the time when you're no longer with us. We want to know how first and second initiation would be conducted. Prabhupada, yes, I shall recommend some of you. After this is settled up, I shall recommend some of you to act as officiating acharyas. Tamal Krishna, is that called Ritvik acharya? Prabhupada, Ritvik, yes. So right from the start, Prabhupada, when they ask, how initiations will go on in the future, he's saying he will select some Ritvik to act as officiating acharya. Officiating means to do on behalf. So they would initiate on behalf of Prabhupada. Okay, so this is understood as what actually Prabhupada is giving as the answer for the future, how it would go on in the future through these officiating acharyas initiated on his behalf. But the following questions, things are a little confusing, and one may wonder why exactly did Prabhupada answer this? Why didn't Prabhupada come out clearly and just say, I will continue to be the initiating spiritual master. They will be my disciples, and I shall remain as the initiating spiritual master for ISKCON into the future. So I will admit that Prabhupada doesn't exactly say it like that, that what Prabhupada says here can be somewhat ambiguous, open to interpretation. Now, there's a question of whether this tape is actually authentic, whether it is or whether it was tampered with. There's been some reports on this that were done where the tape was submitted for forensic analysis. A lot of money was paid to do, examination of this tape. And these analyses concluded that the tape was actually edited. So, it's hard to tell exactly what's going on. There's also been a few different interpretations of this, a few different versions of this conversation, whether the translation was done by different persons. It's hard to say. So this conversation it's a little bit of a wonder, why it says what it does, whether it's actually a legit recording. But when you still analyze this conversation, when you take what Prabhupada says right up front, that he would authorize initiate these Ritvik or officiating Acharya, and then in the conclusion he says, when I order, he says only when I give an order, then you can become guru. So that order is nowhere do we find such an order that was ever given to authorize these gurus. So, okay, the conversation continues. Tamal Krishna, is that called Ritvik? Prabhupada Ritvik, yes. Satsvarup, then what is the relationship of that person who gives the initiation? And the Prabhupada, he's guru. Satsvarup, but he does it on your behalf. Prabhupada, yes, that is formality. Because in my presence, one should not become guru. So on my behalf, on my order. Amara Agyaya Guru Hana, be actually guru, but by my order. Satsvarup, so they may also be considered your disciples. Prabhupada, yes, they are disciples. Why consider who? Tamal Krishna. No, he's asking these Ritvik Acharyas, they're officiating, giving Diksha. They're the people who they give Diksha to. Whose disciples are they? Prabhupada, they're his disciple. Tamal Krishna, they're his disciple. Prabhupada, who is initiating? He is grand disciple. Satsvarup, yes. Tamal Krishna, that's clear. Satsvarup, then we have a question concern. Prabhupada, when I order, you become guru. He becomes regular guru. That's all. He becomes disciple of my disciple. That's it. And Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Amar Agyaya Guru. One who can understand the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he can become guru. Or one who understands his guru's order, the same parampara, he can become guru. And therefore I shall select some of you. So I could see how one taking just this conversation by itself, I can see how one may interpret it as, oh, Prabhupada says here, he's talking about grand disciples and disciple of my disciple, and he says he becomes guru, and he shall select some of you. So I could see how just taking this conversation, one could come to the conclusion that, oh, Prabhupada authorized them to initiate their own disciples. But he says, I shall select some of you. And then the letter that follows, the official letter of July 9th, 1977, which was signed and authorized by Prabhupada to be distributed to the whole, all the leaders of ISKCON. And that letter, it names these 11 persons as Ritvik Acharya, Ritvik representatives or officiating Acharyas. It doesn't mention anything there about them that they would initiate their own disciples. It only talks about them performing initiation on behalf of Prabhupada, and it says that this system should continue henceforward. So really, when you analyze it together with the July 9th letter, it really makes more sense that this was Prabhupada's intention. Why Prabhupada's intention for them to continue acting as officiating acharyas? Why does Prabhupada not just clearly say that here in this conversation? Well, that's a good question, but the thing is that, Lord Krishna is, sometimes it is said that Lord Krishna is acts in mysterious ways. Sometimes it's said that, nobody knows what the Lord's plan is, and Lord Krishna acts in mysterious ways. And the way I see it is that Prabhupada was aware that, there was a lot of ambitious disciples that were, looking to take this position of becoming guru. And he wasn't going to, just shatter their hopes and dreams. He wasn't going to just bar them from doing that. In fact, we looked at the verse yesterday where it said that one can, a second-class devotee can accept disciples, but actually one should not accept such a guru because his guidance is insufficient. So Prabhupada talked about how I compared this verse with Prabhupada talked about how people worship the demigods, and Prabhupada said this is condemned, but it's not forbidden. So he said the scriptures condemn this, but it's not forbidden. So I see it the same way here. The Prabhupada, he basically condemns it, or he discourages becoming a guru, initiating one's own disciples. He discourages accepting anything less than an Uttam Adhikari as initiating spiritual master. But at the same time, he says it's not forbidden. So it looks like Prabhupada kind of like he didn't come straight out to and say this in black and white, because he sort of left it up to everybody's one's intelligence. It's sort of like a test to each devotee to use their intelligence to understand this. And when you put it together with everything else that Prabhupada has said about what is an authorized spiritual master, it makes more sense. So, and when you put it together with the July 9th letter and Prabhupada's will, where Prabhupada says only his initiated disciple can be, that they can be the managers of ISKCON properties for all, as long as ISKCON exists. That's something that requires only a Ritvik system for there to continue to be generations of Prabhupada disciples who can become managers of the ISKCON properties according to Prabhupada's will. So Prabhupada, the way I see it is that like Prabhupada left this instruction in, he put the pieces. You have to put the pieces of the puzzle together more or less. For most of us, some devotees may argue with that, and they say, well, it's very clear. You just read the July 9th letter and it's black and white. Well, it may be for some, but not for everyone. So, for most of us, you have to like look at everything together. Prabhupada left the clues. He left, put the pieces of evidence of what, the system that he wants. He put it out there, and you just have to do the research, and you have to do the study, and you have to do the inquiry. You have to investigate this matter. You can't just, take it blindly, take someone's word blindly for it. So when you put it all together, it makes more sense. So, that's my understanding of why Prabhupada didn't, because I've asked myself over the years, well, why didn't Prabhupada just straight up blank right here just say they'll be my disciples, and I will remain as the initiating spiritual master even after my physical departure? Why doesn't it say that also in the July 9th letter? It's somewhat open to interpretation, at least from my point of view. That's the way I see it. I see it somewhat open to interpretation, but the more sensible interpretation of this conversation and the July 9th letter is that Prabhupada is actually intended to remain as the initiating spiritual master, but he didn't shatter their hopes and dreams or pull out the carpet from underneath their feet by telling them, sorry, you can't, I'm going to not let anybody become guru. I will remain as the only guru for ISKCON. He didn't do that. Like he just left it open to, for us to understand in our own way, according to our own, ability to surrender to, Prabhupada's instructions. We have to try to investigate it for our own and use our own intelligence to understand these things. And that's why he says, one who understands his guru's order, the same parampara, he can become guru. And therefore I shall select some of you. So he wanted us to understand. It's a little bit mysterious, Lord Krishna is the most mysterious. Sometimes it says that Lord Krishna is the most tricky. So this order is also somewhat like along in that mode of like somewhat a little mysterious. Prabhupada is giving them the clues here, and he expects the disciple to use their intelligence to understand, not to just interpret things according to their own sense gratification. But I would say he did sort of leave it open somewhat to interpretation in this way. So here, okay, so now we know that ISKCON, after 10 years of doing this zonal system, ISKCON understood that Prabhupada wanted these zones, and they followed this system of zones with these 11 representatives that Prabhupada appointed in the July 9th letter. But they didn't execute it properly. Instead of acting as officiating acharyas, they took this position of accepting their own disciples and being worshipped in a grand way as pure devotees, Diksha gurus. So, but then they realized that there was all these fall downs, and they realized something was wrong, and they had a so-called guru reform, and they acknowledged that something was wrong with the system. So they, to say that this is evidence that Prabhupada appointed them as gurus is also very questionable, because they didn't follow through with that themselves. They said, oh, well, Prabhupada appointed these 11 pure devotees, and then afterward they said, no, well, actually Prabhupada didn't appoint these persons as pure devotees. He just made it that anybody can become a guru. So they changed their position, and then here Tamal Krishna also contradicts that conclusion. So Tamal Krishna was under pressure by the GBC. There was like a fiasco with these zones because there was competition amongst groups, and each of these zones and their gurus, there was like a competition for gaining followers. And so Tamal Krishna was under pressure for for his position. The GBC was wanted him to. They were considering to have him removed from his position because he was getting too much influence or too much power, and there was some contention between what he was doing and other gurus and the GBC. So they had this meetup where Tamal Krishna acknowledged that, well, actually, he says, actually, Prabhupada never appointed these 11 gurus. He never appointed any gurus, okay? But then he changes his position. This is actually, let's not just have 11, we can open it up. Because there was actually more, there was other persons too that were also ambitious to have this position. So Tamal Krishna, under pressure, he acknowledged that, well, Prabhupada never actually appointed any gurus, so instead we could just open it up to like anybody can become a guru. So here he says that in this May 28th conversation, actually Prabhupada never appointed any gurus. And in the July 9th letter, he says it right here. Now I understand that what he did was very clear. He was physically incapable of performing the function of initiation. Therefore, he appointed officiating priests to initiate on his behalf. This is very important because when it comes to initiating, it isn't whoever is nearest, it's whoever your heart goes to. Who you repose your faith on. You take initiation from him. But when it's officiating, it's whoever is nearest, and he was very clear. He named them. They were spread out all over the world, and he said, whoever you're nearest, you just approach that person, and they'll check you out. Then on my behalf, they'll initiate. It is not a question that you repose your faith in that person, nothing. That's a function for the guru. In order for me to manage this movement, Prabhupada said, I have to form a GBC, and I will appoint the following people. In order to continue the process of people joining our movement and getting initiated, I have to appoint some priests to help me, because I cannot physically manage everyone myself. And that's all it was. It was never any more than that. You can bet your bottom dollar that Prabhupada would have spoken for days and hours and weeks on end about how to set up this thing with the gurus, because he had already said it a million times. He said, my Guru Maharaj did not appoint anyone. It's by qualification. We made a great mistake. I feel that this realization or this understanding is essential if we are to avoid further things happening, because believe me, it's going to repeat. It's just a question of time until things have a little bit faded out again and another incident is going to happen, whether it's here in LA or somewhere else. It's going to continuously happen until you allow the actual spiritual force of Krishna to be exhibited without restriction. I feel that the GBC, if they don't adopt this point very quickly, if they don't realize this truth, you cannot show me anything on tape or in writing where Prabhupada says, I appoint these 11 as gurus. It does not exist, because he never appointed any gurus. This is a myth. So right there, Tamal Krishna admits Prabhupada never appointed anyone as gurus. Yet the whole current ISKCON system is based on the interpretation of that May 28th conversation. They use that as that, Prabhupada said that they were gurus and he appointed them as gurus. So there is actually, if you take Tamal Krishna's word for it right here, that Prabhupada never appointed any gurus, then you cannot say that Prabhupada appointed them as gurus on May 28th. So where is the evidence that Prabhupada ever appointed any gurus anywhere? It doesn't exist. And looking at that May 28th conversation again, they asked Prabhupada specifically how things would go on after his departure, and he said, I shall appoint some Ritvik. And Tamal Krishna here is acknowledging that Prabhupada appointed Ritvik. And that's what he said that they would be for into the future after his departure. So there is no evidence anywhere that Prabhupada ever authorized this system. Just like Bhaktisiddhanta, and as Tamal Krishna acknowledged here, Bhaktisiddhanta never appointed anyone. There's no evidence that Prabhupada ever appointed any gurus, and there's no evidence that he ever authorized persons to initiate their own disciples after his departure. There is only more evidence to the contrary that actually he has intended a officiating acharyas to initiate on his behalf. Let's go and take a look at the actually July 9th letter, keeping in mind that we just looked at that May 28th conversation where they asked Prabhupada, what would happen after his departure, and he said, I shall appoint you Ritvik officiating acharyas. And then this is the letter that, and again, Prabhupada concluded by saying, when I order. So this is, and he said, I shall select some of you. So this is the follow-up letter, May 28th, this is July 9th, 1977. So this is only like a month or so later. And this is the follow-up letter, and it refers to that conversation. This is actually penned by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and it is signed, it has Prabhupada's signed authorization. So it is intended to be distributed to the whole society. To all GBC and temple presidents, dear Maharajas and Prabhus, please accept my humble obeisances at your feet. Recently, when all of the GBC members were with His Divine Grace in Vrindavan, that's May 28th, Srila Prabhupada indicated that soon he would appoint some of his senior disciples to act as Ritvik, representative of the Acharya, for the purpose of performing initiations, both first initiation and second initiation. His Divine Grace has so far given a list of 11 disciples who will act in that capacity. And you have the 11 disciples: Kirtananda, Satsrup, Jayapataka, Tamal, Krishna, Hridayananda, Bhavananda, Hamsaduta, Rameshwar, Harikesh, Bhagavan, Jayatirtha. Some of these persons, by the way, some crazy stories with some of these original 11 gurus, some of the crazy things that happened. One of them, was it Jayatirtha? I believe it was Jayatirtha, was actually murdered by one of the followers. Supposedly was having an affair with this person's wife, and the guy decapitated him. So, I mean, what kind of a crazy thing. So this, like crazy stuff like that, one should ask, if someone is acting on behalf of Prabhupada, how could such a crazy thing happen? Well, evidently these crazy incidences are to show us that these persons weren't doing according to Prabhupada's order. They took this big seed and grand worshipped and be worshipped as pure devotees and doing all kinds of, wild, crazy things, breaking the principles. So one should ask, well, how could that be? How could have Prabhupada? So anyhow, I was reading the letter here. Let's continue on. In the past, temple presidents have written to Srila Prabhupada recommending a particular devotee's initiation. Now that Srila Prabhupada has named these representatives, temple presidents may henceforward send recommendation for first and second initiation to whichever of these 11 representatives are nearest their temple. After considering the recommendation, these representatives may accept the devotee as an initiated disciple of Srila Prabhupada by giving a spiritual name, or in the case of second initiation, by chanting on the Gayatri thread, just as Srila Prabhupada has done. The newly initiated devotees are disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the above 11 senior devotees acting as his representative. After the temple president receives a letter from these representatives giving the spiritual name or the thread, he can perform the fire yagya in the temple as was being done before. The name of a newly initiated disciple should be sent by the representative who has accepted him or her to Srila Prabhupada to be included in His Divine Grace's Initiated Disciples book. So, there it's, here it is. This is it. This is the letter saying this is the system to carry on henceforward. And there's no other instruction after this that says anything should have been changed. There was no instruction that these 11 persons should have become the initiating gurus. Tamal Krishna, we just showed, denied that Prabhupada never instructed them to become initiating gurus. He said, you cannot show me that anywhere in writing. Doesn't exist. And but instead they dismantled the whole system, the whole zonal system, which was intended for these 11 representatives. And they, instead of having just 11 gurus, they opened up to a voting system of hundreds, or at least 100 plus nowadays. So again, for some persons, just this letter itself was not clear cut, was not black and white enough to understand that this was intended to go on after Prabhupada's physical departure. So this has been a point of contention over the years, and still many devotees do not accept that it is intended for the future. Some persons have pointed this out here. They will say this last line, the newly initiated disciple the name should be sent to by the representative who has accepted him or her to Srila Prabhupada to be included in his Divine Graces Initiated Disciples book. So they say, well, if this was intended for after Prabhupada's departure, then how can the name be sent to Srila Prabhupada? So, it's really kind of I would say it's really of a mundane consideration, because, if we can offer prayers, if we can still offer prayers, the Prabhupada has so many disciples out there. If they can still offer him prayers and respects and services, why can't someone, send a name of a new disciple to him to be included in his book, even if it's managed, if it's done physically by one of his, representatives. If it has, one of the disciples of Prabhupada manages this book and it's sent to him, it's being sent to Prabhupada and it's being physically, entered into the book by one of Prabhupada's disciples. So it's somewhat of a mundane concept, a mundane idea that Prabhupada is not physically there to send him the name. That's somewhat of a detail, but that's one of the arguments, the type of arguments that you have. But all these arguments are really just rationale to justify, the rubber stamping of, so many persons who turn out to be, breaking the principles, who become exposed after years. Again, we've had cases of, there's been cases of homosex, there's been child molestation, there's been just all kinds of breaking of principles by persons who are supposed to be initiating gurus to be worshipped as good as God. So to think that Prabhupada, this is the system that Prabhupada has actually authorized, really just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is, that this system should continue henceforward and initiations be done on behalf of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada remain as the official, as the the worshipful, pure devotee spiritual master for the whole institution, and that all devotees are God brothers and God sisters in one family of ISKCON. So we'll look now also another indicator of this is in Prabhupada's will. This is another another clue here that Prabhupada has given us. He's given us, I would say it is somewhat in pieces. He's given us the indicators of what he wants, because I would say for some reason or other, Prabhupada didn't just want to come straight up and say, I will remain as initiated spiritual master. He didn't want to block their ambitions. He knew that there was a lot of ambitious persons, and probably a lot of the book distribution and things that were going on were being driven by this, ambition to have some position and followers and recognition. And some followers of Prabhupada Prabhupada disciples were already getting primed up for, accepting disciples and being worshipped. And there's letters like that where Prabhupada says like, whoa, hold your horses. Is like, there's other letters here, like where Prabhupada indicated that some of his disciples were already ready to take this position to be worshipped. And he's like, well, the law of disciplic succession is that you have to at least wait for your spiritual master to be not physically present anymore. But that's just, that law of disciplic succession doesn't mean one actually becomes qualified to have the position. It's just one of the requirements to be an authorized guru, that, their spiritual master should be not physically there, and then they have to be a pure devotee, and then they have to have a direct order from their spiritual master. Those are the three requirements to be a bona fide Diksha guru, initiating guru, to be worshipped as good as God as a pure devotee. So let's jump over to Prabhupada's will. This is another indicator that confirms that, the July 9th letter is indeed intended, an instruction that is intended to continue henceforward without any change, without any interruption. So Prabhupada's will, this is one of the statements in Prabhupada's will. Each new executive director for the ISKCON properties must be my initiated disciple. There's a story of one of the Prabhupada disciples who said he was there. I don't recall which devotee's who his name was, but his testimony was that he was there and Prabhupada wanted this word changed. He wanted specific wording in this letter because initially it said the director must be an initiated disciple, and Prabhupada changed it to my initiated disciple. So whether that's true or not, it really doesn't matter. It is what it is. This is what it says. This is the exact wording. If you take it literally, word for word, they must be my initiated disciple means Prabhupada's initiated disciple. So according to the present ISKCON system, after these Prabhupada disciples pass on, there will be no more Prabhupada initiated disciples. So who will be there to be an executive director for ISKCON properties? There will be no more persons left to qualify for that. So the only way that this instruction in Prabhupada's will can be carried on is with the Ritvik system, where new generations of disciples will continue to be made into the future as long as ISKCON exists. So as far as whether there'll be another qualified, bona fide initiating guru in the future, that is, a wonder. It's a possibility, but it's somewhat of a speculation. And what we do know is that Prabhupada is there. Prabhupada has set up the system. He's got all the books. Everything's in place. We don't really need to be looking and speculating about who is the next one, or if there even will be such a next person. I mean, even if there is a pure devotee, they could still be acting within this system. It doesn't mean that they have to replace Prabhupada or become the next initiator guru. It could be just some humble devotee that serves very nicely in the mission and works within this framework that Prabhupada has set up. So to accept the current ISKCON system is contrary to so many things that Prabhupada has stated in his will in the July 9th letter. And here is another significant one that we've recently spoke about, this statement where Prabhupada says, Sir Sridhar Maharaj and his two associate gentlemen unauthorizedly selected one acharya and later it proved a failure. The result is now everyone is claiming to be acharya, even though they may be Kanishta Adhikari with no ability to preach. In some of the camps, the acharya is being changed 3 times a year. Therefore, we may not commit the same mistake in our ISKCON camp. So basically, this is essentially what ISKCON is doing, is they've made this same mistake that Prabhupada has warned about, and they just opened it up to all kinds of persons to take this position. And so many have been exposed so many times in breaking the principles and doing even abominable things that are even not appropriate for just a decent human being, what to speak of a initiating spiritual master. In 1958, Prabhupada wrote this poem reflecting on the Gaudiya Math, the condition of the Gaudiya Math. He says, this was 1958, about Bhaktisiddhanta's institution, the Gaudiya Math. And the 4th line, Prabhupada says, the essential purport neglected. Those disciples who were irresolute in performing devotional service, according to your instructions, have divided your mission into many factions. It appears that the tigress of ambition for material name and fame has appeared and personally provoked this upheaval. The disciple's empowerment is lost. Your so-called disciple, the jackal named Ananta Vasudev, disobeyed your final instructions to keep the mission united and thereby created a scandalous fiasco. The result of this philosophical deviation is evident to this day, as imitative sahajias are being worshipped as gurus in your temples. Is there a single temple to be found where your instructions are still being followed? As it is said, Punar Mushika Bhava, everyone has again become a mouse. The lion's food has been stolen away by the deceptive tricks of the jackal. Now caught in Maya's clutches, everyone is reduced to wailing and weeping. The preaching mission is scattered. The Vaishnavas were famous as Patita Pavana, deliverers of the fallen, but now this title has fallen into disgrace. Countless numbers of your disciples have been forced to leave your movement. At such an inauspicious time, O Master, what can be done to repair the damage that is done? The beautiful garden that you had so carefully planted is now parched and withered away. O Master, please awaken some good intelligence in this insignificant disciple of yours, so that my firm faith in your transcendental message may increase more and more. O Srila Prabhupada, you personally suffer to see the suffering of the fallen conditioned souls. On this day of separation, I am utterly despondent. So Prabhupada was very disappointed in the outcome of his god brothers carrying out the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta. But history repeats itself, and Prabhupada has given us these histories as a warning. And indeed, history has repeated itself in such a almost precisely the same way that the history of the Gaudiya Math is unfolded. Here, where he says the disciple Ananta Vasudev deviated the movement, in the same way it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj who played the same role in this instance of, basically introducing this deviation and of exactly the same ideas that deviated the Gaudiya Math were basically handed over to Tamal Krishna, and he influenced how the things carried on. He influenced opening up the doors to not only the 11. First it was the 11, and because they couldn't hold on to the position as one of the 11, so he made the compromise. Well, actually, we could have more. Let's open it up to, as anybody who wants this position. We open up the doors to 100 plus initiating gurus. And to this day, time and time again, we've seen ISKCON gurus fall down many times. And that's what to speak of. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, what all the different gurus are doing. We just know of the ones that have been exposed, and there's been quite a few. In fact, let's take a look at this. Okay, sorry, but I just was talking for like 15 minutes and it wasn't running. I'm just going to make a quick summary. I mean, basically, if you want to read this letter, it's there in the document on prabhupadinitiation.blogspot.com. Just go to the main document and then do a search for Guna Grahi, and you'll find his letter there where he admitted, before he passed on, that, he was still addicted to pornography even while he was initiating. And even though he was caught before he had become an initiating guru, he was caught and it was brought to the GBC, and only a short time after he was, given this position of initiating guru. So this is just the standard. It's a lower standard. That's the ISKCON standard is crowning persons who are still, with material desires into this position to be worshipped as a pure devotee, as good as God. This is, the position of the initiating guru. And like Lord Krishna says right here, what is the symptom of bona fide spiritual master? Everyone wants to become spiritual master. He has taken shelter of the supreme absolute truth without any material desires. He has no more any material desires. He's simply interested in Krishna or the absolute truth. Okay, there's actually this next one I meant to read. This is from Madhya Lila 24.331 purport. When one has attained the topmost position of Mahabhagavat, he is to be accepted as a guru and worshipped exactly like Hari, the personality of Godhead. Only such a person is eligible to occupy the post of a guru. Madhya 24.330. The guru must be situated on the topmost platform of devotional service. There are 3 classes of devotees, and the guru must be accepted from the topmost class. The first class devotee is the spiritual master for all kinds of people. Next one is from Nectar of Instruction. One should not become a spiritual master unless he has attained the platform of Uttama Adhikari. A neophyte Vaishnava or a Vaishnava situated on the intermediate platform can also accept disciples, but such disciples must be on the same platform, and it should be understood that they cannot advance very well toward the ultimate goal of life under his insufficient guidance. Therefore, disciples should be careful to accept an Uttama Adhikari as a spiritual master. And again, this is the most essential verse to me, because like Prabhupada is in the same way that he said demigod worship is condemned but not forbidden. Here is in the same way. It's like he's condemning becoming a guru and accepting disciples, but not completely forbidding it. Because he says like one can be like accept disciples, but then he says one shouldn't accept such a spiritual master. And like the highest, like again, there's no possibility that a first class devotee will fall down. So he's recommending you accept a first class devotee. Our next spiritual master is he who initiates us into transcendental knowledge, the Diksha Guru, and he is to be worshipped as much as I am. This is the words of Lord Krishna. The spiritual master may be more than one. The spiritual master who instructs a disciple about spiritual matters is called Shiksha Guru, and the spiritual master who initiates a disciple is called Diksha Guru. Both them are my representatives. There may be many spiritual masters who instruct, but the initiator spiritual master is one. And why is that? Because he is to be worshipped. When one has attained the topmost platform of Mahabhagavat, he is to be accepted as a guru and worshipped exactly like Hari, the personality of Godhead. Only such a person is eligible to occupy the post of a guru. So this is the higher teaching. This is the higher understanding. ISKCON is taking the lesser understanding that, oh, well, he can accept disciples even though his guidance is insufficient. That is the position that ISKCON is taking. But this is, Prabhupada's is a higher instruction that one should be careful to accept an Uttama, and only such a person is eligible to occupy the post. So Prabhupada has left it in such a way for each devotee to make their own decision, and it's up to you, it's up to us. What do you want? Do you want to accept, a lesser level of, devotional service by accepting a guru who is not on the topmost level and whose guidance is insufficient? Or do you want to accept, the topmost first-class pure devotee, Mahabhagavat, who can take us all the way back to Godhead? So that is, evidently, Lord Krishna has designed this whole scenario in such a way to give us a choice. It's up to you. He hasn't forced anything on us. He's allowing us, giving us our free will, and allowing us to use our own intelligence and make our own choice in this matter. So, in that way, Prabhupada has left it in such a way that is, gives us the opportunity to make our own choice. Most devotees are choosing to go with the mainstream popular opinion and go with one of the ISKCON gurus who Prabhupada, who we've seen fall down so many times. And some devotees, more devotees now, I'm seeing there's more initiations going on. I just saw Yashodanandana Prabhu was conducting initiations recently for more devotees around the world are accepting Prabhupada as their initiating spiritual master, and they're getting official initiation done by one of Prabhupada's disciples. So there you go. Thank you for listening, and Jai Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna.